John had always been a man who valued kindness and empathy. For years, he had worked as a social worker, helping children in need, but there was always one thought lingering in the back of his mind: adoption. He didn't want to just help children from a distance. He wanted to make a real difference in someone's life. He wanted to give a child a home, a future, and most importantly, love. But the idea of adoption was complicated. John had heard stories from others about how difficult the process could be. Some people said it was too hard. Others questioned if he, as a single man, was the right person to adopt. But these concerns never deterred John. He wasn't concerned about the opinions of others. He knew in his heart that adopting a child would be the right choice. One evening, John found himself scrolling through an adoption website, looking through the profiles of children available for adoption. As he scrolled, a particular profile caught his eye: a young boy named Malik. He was a black child, only 8 years old, with dark brown eyes that spoke of wisdom far beyond his years. What stood out most about Malik was his story. He had lost his leg in a tragic accident. John read through the details of Malik's life. He had been in foster care for several years, moving from home to home, never quite finding a place where he belonged. His disability made it harder for him to fit in with other children, and it seemed as if he had been forgotten by the world. But something in John's heart clicked. He had to meet this boy. A few weeks later, after completing the paperwork and waiting for approval, John was finally able to meet Malik in person. They arranged to meet at a local community center, where Malik was playing with other kids. As John walked in, he saw Malik sitting on the swing, alone, looking down at the ground. He walked over and introduced himself. Malik looked up with wide eyes, unsure of what to expect. John smiled warmly and told him that he was there because he wanted to meet him. The moment was a little awkward at first, but as they started talking, they discovered common interests. They both loved basketball, and Malik shared how much he enjoyed drawing. John was touched by how mature Malik was, despite all the hardships he had faced. They spent the next hour talking about life, dreams, and everything in between. As John left the community center that day, his heart was full. He knew this was the child he had been waiting for. He didn't care about Malik's disability, or his skin color, or his difficult past. He saw Malik for who he was, a bright, talented boy with so much potential. And that was all that mattered to John. The next day, he called the adoption agency and began the process. There would be challenges ahead. He knew that, but John was ready. He had made his decision, and he was going to give Malik the love and care he deserved. He wasn't just adopting a child. He was bringing a new member into his family. And for John, there was no greater joy than knowing he was about to change a child's life forever. John's heart was filled with excitement and nervousness as he picked up Malik from the foster care facility. This was the beginning of a new chapter in both of their lives. Malik had never known what it was like to truly feel at home. Over the years, he had been in and out of different foster homes, and each time, he hoped for stability, for a family that would accept him. Now, here he was, about to start a new life with John, the man who had chosen to bring him into his home. As they drove back to John's house, there was an awkward silence. Malik sat quietly in the passenger seat, his small hands clutching the seatbelt, unsure of what to expect. John tried to make conversation, asking about Malik's favorite activities and his hopes for the future, but Malik remained mostly silent, looking out the window. John knew that trust would take time. Malik had been through so much already, and it wasn't easy to open up after being let down by so many others. John didn't push him. Instead, he focused on making Malik feel comfortable in his new home. When they arrived, John showed Malik to his new room. It wasn't much, but it was clean and cozy, with a bed that had superhero-themed sheets, something Malik had always wanted. He watched Malik's face light up when he saw the small gifts John had left on the bed. Some toys, a few books, and a basketball. John knew that it would take time for Malik to feel completely at ease. He had to be patient and show Malik that this was now his home too. Over the next few days, they spent time together doing simple things, playing basketball in the yard, watching movies, and sharing stories about their lives. John made sure to always include Malik in family activities, inviting him to join in on meals and weekend outings. Despite the loving environment, things weren't always easy. Malik sometimes seemed distant, and there were moments when he would withdraw into himself, especially when it was time to go to bed. John had learned about Malik's past, how he had been made to feel different because of his disability and his race. It wasn't always easy to be the new kid in school, and it was even harder when people didn't understand or accept him. One day, after a week of getting to know each other, John decided it was time to talk to Malik about his feelings. Sitting down in the living room, John gently asked, "How are you feeling, Malik? Is everything okay?" Malik looked up at him, his eyes a little uncertain. For a moment, there was silence, and then Malik spoke softly. "I never had anyone who cared about me like this before." His voice was shaky, but his words were full of meaning. "I don't know what to do with all this love. It's scary." John's heart broke a little as he listened. He realized how much trust it would take for Malik to fully open up and feel safe in his new home. But John also knew that with patience and time, they would get there. Malik wasn't just a child in need of a home. He was a child who needed to be reminded that he was worthy of love, that he mattered. That night, as they sat together on the couch watching a movie, Malik rested his head on John's shoulder. It was a small, quiet moment, but to John, it meant the world. It was a sign that Malik was starting to trust him, and that was all he needed to know. As the weeks went by, John began to see the growing bond between him and Malik. They were settling into a routine, but there were still many challenges ahead. Malik was a bright boy with a lot of potential, but his past experiences had left scars. He sometimes struggled with confidence, unsure of his place in the world. His disability, a missing leg, had often been a source of mockery and bullying in the past. Now, in the safety of his new home, he was slowly learning to trust again. One day, as they were walking in the neighborhood, they ran into a group of kids playing basketball. Malik, who had once loved the game, looked at them longingly but hesitated to join. John could see the conflict in his eyes. He knew Malik wanted to play but was afraid of being judged. "Hey, buddy," John said, placing a hand on Malik's shoulder. "Why don't you go join them? I'm sure they'll be happy to have you play." Malik looked up at him, still unsure. "But I don't have two legs to run like them. They might laugh at me." John's heart ached for Malik. He knew how much it hurt to feel different, to feel like you didn't belong. But he also knew that Malik needed to believe in himself. "Malik, no one is going to laugh at you. You are just as good as anyone else, no matter what. You just need to believe in yourself." Malik hesitated, but John gave him an encouraging nod. Slowly, Malik walked up to the group of kids. At first, they looked at him curiously, but soon enough, they were passing the ball to him. And Malik was smiling as he dribbled and made shots. The other kids were excited to have him join, and they didn't care about his leg. They just wanted to play basketball. That afternoon, Malik came home grinning ear to ear. He was tired but happy, a sense of pride radiating from him. "Did you have fun?" John asked, knowing the answer but wanting to hear it from Malik. "Yeah, they didn't care about my leg at all. I made a basket too," Malik said, his eyes shining. John smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride. Malik had taken a step forward, not just in playing basketball, but in overcoming his fears. It wasn't just about the game. It was about Malik learning to accept himself for who he was, to see his own value beyond his disability. However, the challenges didn't end there. John still saw moments where Malik struggled with the weight of his past. Sometimes Malik would withdraw, retreating into himself, especially when something reminded him of the teasing he had endured. There were days when he would sit quietly in his room, and John knew it was his way of coping with the emotional scars he carried. One evening, as they were having dinner, Malik suddenly asked, "John, do you think I'm different because I have one leg?" John put down his fork and looked at Malik, choosing his words carefully. "Malik, everyone is different, but that doesn't make you any less special. Your leg doesn't define who you are. It's your heart, your kindness, and your strength that make you amazing. You're perfect just the way you are." Malik smiled softly, still unsure but comforted by John's words. John knew that healing would take time, but he was committed to being there for Malik every step of the way. It wasn't about fixing everything right away. It was about showing Malik, through love and patience, that he was worthy of respect, happiness, and everything life had to offer. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between John and Malik grew stronger. Every small victory, every moment of trust, was a reminder of just how far they had come. Despite the challenges, John was determined to help Malik believe in himself and live a life full of possibilities. And in doing so, John was reminded of something powerful. Love truly had the power to heal even the deepest wounds. Malik's journey with John continued to be full of ups and downs, but each day brought them closer. The more time they spent together, the more John saw how special Malik was. Despite the challenges Malik faced because of his disability, John never saw his leg as a weakness. In fact, it only made Malik stronger. But the world outside their home wasn't always kind, and John knew that they still had battles ahead of them. One day, as they were walking through the park, a group of children nearby noticed Malik. At first, Malik ignored them, just enjoying the fresh air and the simple pleasure of being outside. But as the group of kids came closer, John noticed that they were pointing and whispering. He could see Malik's face change, his smile fading. "Hey, look at that kid with only one leg," one of the kids said loudly, laughing. Malik froze. John's heart sank, and he quickly moved closer to Malik, trying to shield him from the cruel words. "Is everything okay?" John asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Malik didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at the ground, his eyes filled with sadness. "Why do they say that, John?" Malik asked quietly, his voice trembling. "Why do they always look at me like I'm different?" John knelt down beside him, gently lifting Malik's chin so that they were eye to eye. He could see the hurt in Malik's eyes, the confusion and sadness that came from being judged for something he couldn't control. "Malik, you are not different in a bad way. They don't understand what you've been through. But that doesn't mean it's your fault. People sometimes say things without thinking, but you are strong. You are amazing, and nothing about you needs to change for them to understand that," John said, his voice full of compassion. Malik sniffled but looked up at John, feeling comforted by his words. "But why do they have to say those things?" Malik asked again, his voice softer now. "They don't know better, Malik. Sometimes people fear what they don't understand, and that's what makes them say hurtful things. But that doesn't mean they are right. What matters is how you see yourself, not what they think. You are brave, and you have the strength to keep going, no matter what." Malik wiped his eyes, still unsure, but feeling a little better. John smiled at him and gave him a reassuring pat on the back. "Let's keep walking," John said. "The world is full of people who will admire you for your strength, and that's what I want you to remember. You are not defined by what anyone else says." As they walked away from the group of children, Malik's mood seemed to improve. Slowly, he began to understand that while there would always be people who didn't understand, there were also people who saw his worth. Malik began to see that he didn't have to let the opinions of others affect his confidence. Later that day, when they returned home, Malik did something unexpected. He grabbed a small piece of paper and began drawing. John was in the living room when he saw Malik sitting at the table, his eyes focused on his artwork. "What are you drawing, Malik?" John asked, walking over to him. Malik looked up and smiled. "I'm drawing myself," he said, showing John the picture. It was a simple drawing, but it showed Malik standing tall and proud, with his arms wide open, smiling. "You look great," John said with a grin. Malik beamed back. "I feel great too. I think I'm starting to understand what you mean. I don't have to be like everyone else. I can be me." John was moved by Malik's words. He knew that, even though Malik still faced struggles, he was beginning to find his strength. John knew that they had a long journey ahead, but moments like these made it all worthwhile. They weren't just overcoming obstacles. They were growing together, becoming stronger as a family, and teaching each other valuable lessons along the way. Malik was learning to see his worth, and John was learning to see the world through Malik's eyes. In each other, they had found a source of love, support, and strength. They were ready for whatever came next. As the weeks went by, Malik continued to grow stronger, both physically and emotionally. He felt more confident each day, and John could see the change in him. They were a team, and they faced every challenge together. But even with all the progress, life wasn't always easy for Malik. One afternoon, as they were walking through a local mall, they passed a group of teenagers. Malik, who was used to the occasional stares and whispers, didn't think much of it. But this time, something was different. The group of teenagers started pointing and laughing, and Malik could feel the familiar sting of their judgment. John noticed right away. He could see Malik's shoulders slump and his head lower. He felt a rush of anger rise in him, but he kept his calm. "Hey, buddy, are you okay?" John asked softly, placing a hand on Malik's shoulder. Malik didn't answer right away. He kept walking, his eyes fixed on the floor. John could tell that he was upset, so he gently guided Malik to a quieter part of the mall. "Let's take a break, okay?" John suggested. They sat down on a nearby bench. Malik's eyes were downcast, and John could tell he was battling with his thoughts. "Why do they always stare at me?" Malik finally asked, his voice quiet but filled with sadness. John took a deep breath. He knew it wasn't easy, but he had to remind Malik of the truth he needed to hear. "Malik, people don't always know how to act when they see someone different from them. Sometimes they're curious, and other times they're just rude. But none of that changes who you are. You are brave, smart, and kind. What matters is how you feel about yourself. The opinions of others can hurt, but they don't define you." Malik looked up at John, his eyes still filled with uncertainty. "But it still hurts," he whispered. John nodded. He understood. "I know it does, Malik. It's okay to feel hurt. But what makes you stronger is how you rise after that hurt. You're not just anyone. You're a person who has already faced so much, and you've come so far." Malik was quiet for a moment, taking in John's words. He looked up and smiled weakly. "I'll try to remember that," he said, his voice gaining a little strength. Just then, a woman walking by smiled at Malik and gave him a thumbs up. "Hey, keep going, kid," she said, her voice warm and encouraging. Malik blinked in surprise. He wasn't used to positive attention from strangers, but her kindness seemed to lift his spirits. "See," John said, pointing at the woman. "Not everyone sees you the way those teenagers do. There are people out there who appreciate you for who you are." Malik smiled, feeling a little better. He realized that while there would always be those who didn't understand him, there were also people who saw the good in him. They continued their walk through the mall, and this time Malik held his head a little higher. He wasn't going to let the rude comments of a few strangers affect his sense of self-worth. He had John's support, and that meant everything. Later that evening, when they got home, Malik excitedly grabbed a book from the shelf. It was a story about a hero who faced many obstacles, but overcame them with strength and courage. Malik smiled as he opened the first page. "Hey, John, you're like the hero in this book," Malik said, looking up from the book. John chuckled and ruffled Malik's hair. "Maybe I am, but you're the real hero. You've taught me so much about strength and bravery." Malik grinned, his confidence growing with every passing day. Together, He and John were not just surviving. They were thriving, showing each other that love, kindness, and support could help them overcome anything. And with each new day, Malik was starting to believe more and more in his own strength. As they settled into their evening routine, Malik and John knew that the road ahead might still have challenges, but they were ready to face them together. The days following the encounter at the mall were filled with small victories for Malik. He no longer walked with his head down when he entered a room. There was something different about his posture, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. The support and love from John, coupled with his own determination, had started to change how he saw himself. One afternoon, as John was helping Malik with his homework, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from a local community center that had been hosting a program for children with disabilities, offering sports activities and mentorship. Malik's eyes lit up when he saw the letter. "This is it," Malik exclaimed. "They accepted me into the program." John smiled and pulled Malik into a hug. "I knew you'd make it. You're stronger than you think." The program would allow Malik to engage in physical activities like swimming, basketball, and even a special track program designed for children with disabilities. It was a chance for Malik to build even more confidence in his physical abilities, something that he had always struggled with before. But it wasn't just the physical side of things that excited Malik. The program also offered mentorship, and for someone like him, someone who had often felt different, it was a chance to connect with others who had similar experiences. When the first day of the program finally arrived, Malik was both excited and nervous. John could sense his anxiety, but knew that Malik was ready. He gave him a reassuring smile as they walked to the center together. "You're going to do great," John said. "Remember, no matter what happens, you're already amazing." Malik nodded, taking a deep breath. He was determined to push past his nerves and make the most of this opportunity. When they entered the community center, Malik was greeted by the sight of several other kids. Some of them were in wheelchairs, others had prosthetics, and some had visible medical conditions, but none of them seemed to care about their differences. They were all there to have fun and support each other. The coach, a kind woman with a warm smile, welcomed Malik with open arms. She introduced him to his group, where he met a few other boys around his age who shared similar experiences. They all had a special bond, something unspoken that tied them together in a way that felt comforting to Malik. After a quick introduction, the coach led the group to the pool for the first activity, swimming. At first, Malik was unsure about getting into the water, but the coach and the other kids encouraged him. He took a few cautious steps into the shallow end, feeling the cool water against his skin. It was a different kind of feeling, soothing and freeing. For the first time, Malik felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. It wasn't just about the activities. It was about the community that welcomed him with open arms. As he swam alongside the other kids, he realized that they weren't judging him. They were supporting him. By the end of the day, Malik felt a sense of accomplishment. He had pushed himself outside his comfort zone, and in doing so, had discovered new strengths. He wasn't just the kid with one leg anymore. He was someone who could swim, who could laugh, and who could take on challenges with others by his side. On the way home, John noticed the change in Malik's expression. He was beaming, his face glowing with pride. "How was it?" John asked, his voice full of excitement. "It was amazing," Malik said, his eyes shining. "I didn't know I could do so much. And the other kids, they're so cool. I feel like I belong." John's heart swelled with pride. "You always belonged, Malik. You just needed to see it for yourself." Malik smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle in his heart. He knew that this was just the beginning. With the support of John and the friendships he was building at the community center, Malik was ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. As the months went by, Malik continued to thrive in his new life. The community center had become a second home to him, a place where he was not only accepted but celebrated for who he was. John watched as Malik's confidence grew day by day. Every time he came home from the community center, Malik was excited to share what he had learned, whether it was a new swimming technique or a game he played with his friends. The boy who had once been quiet and uncertain was now filled with enthusiasm, eager to face each new challenge. One evening, after a long day at the center, Malik and John sat down for dinner. The house was filled with warmth as they laughed over stories from their day. As they finished their meal, Malik turned to John with a serious expression on his face. "John, I've been thinking," Malik began. "I want to do something big, something that shows people that just because I have one leg doesn't mean I can't do anything." John raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you have in mind?" Malik smiled, his eyes sparkling with determination. "I want to join the track team at school. I know it'll be tough, but I want to show people that I can run just like anyone else." John was taken aback for a moment. He had never heard Malik express such a strong desire to push himself physically, especially after the challenges he had faced. But in that moment, John understood. This wasn't just about running. It was about Malik's need to prove to himself that he could overcome anything, no matter the obstacles. "That's an amazing idea, Malik," John said, his voice filled with pride. "I'll support you every step of the way, just like always." The next few weeks were filled with preparation. Malik trained every day after school, pushing his limits and becoming stronger with each run. John was right by his side, offering encouragement and guidance, even when Malik felt frustrated by how hard it was. There were days when Malik wanted to give up, but he always remembered the words John had shared with him. "You're stronger than you think." Finally, the day of the track tryouts arrived. Malik stood at the starting line, his heart racing with excitement and nerves. He could see the other kids around him, all eager to compete, but none of them knew what it had taken for Malik to get here. For him, this wasn't just about a race. It was about proving to himself that he was capable of achieving anything he set his mind to. The whistle blew, and Malik took off, his leg moving rhythmically as he sprinted down the track. He didn't focus on the other runners. He focused on his goal, crossing that finish line. His heart beat faster, and his breath became more steady as he pushed himself harder. He could hear the encouraging cheers from the sidelines, and in that moment, it didn't matter how fast the other kids were running. What mattered was that Malik was giving it his all. When he crossed the finish line, he didn't know if he had won, but he felt like a champion. He had done it. He had pushed through his doubts, his fears, and his limitations. John was waiting for him at the finish line, his face full of pride. "You did it, Malik. I'm so proud of you." Malik, breathing heavily but smiling, looked up at John. "I told you I could do it. I just needed to believe in myself." In that moment, Malik realized something important. It wasn't about the race, the trophy, or the accolades. It was about proving to himself that he was worthy, that he had the strength to overcome anything. The journey had been long, but the reward wasn't in crossing the finish line. It was in discovering the power within himself. As John and Malik left the track that day, they knew that this was only the beginning. With every challenge they faced together, they grew stronger, and their bond grew deeper. They had proven that love, support, and determination could overcome any obstacle, and no matter what the future held, they would face it together, knowing that they had the strength to overcome anything.